Well, good afternoon. I hope I didn't interrupt your lunch too much.
I was done eating, thank you.
Okay. Could you state your name and your affiliation?
My name is Amy Pollock, spelled Pollock, and I am a caregiver for my husband who's been diagnosed with CKD, CHF, and has bipolar as well.
Okay. And what drew you to this event? Well, first, let me start with how did you learn about the event?
I learned about the event through an email. I've received multiple emails over the year through the different programs that Christiana runs, and I've participated in a few over the years as well. With the recent diagnosis of chronic kidney disease for my husband, I kind of am still feeling spongy and want to get whatever information I can, and felt that this would be a great opportunity to do just that.
And are you a resident of Delaware?
Yes, I live in North Wilmington.
Okay, well, great. And so far, you've heard a series of lectures this morning. Are those lectures, have they, let's just, you heard a lecture on surveillance, you heard a lecture on in-state, on the Delaware perspective in terms of in-stage renal disease. You heard about disparities in the kidney disease. I'll stop there. There are others I'll bring up in a minute. Did anything resonate from any of those presentations with you?
Okay, with the presentations that were made this morning, end-stage renal disease is obviously of importance. I will admit it's not yet on my radar because I'm not dealing with it personally, but it's good information to have to know where to go for it. The discussion about surveillance is definitely important. I think that part of what I've been dealing with on my husband's behalf is the lack of awareness from all caregivers at this point on kidney disease for my husband, because the heart failure has taken a priority. And one of the things I'm learning is that kidney disease is just as important and needs to be continually monitored or surveilled. And I think that the more information as a whole that there is to work with, getting more information about potential chronic kidney disease patients and compiling it and comparing it is going to be to everyone's benefit. The other thing in one of this morning's discussions that tripped a trigger for me was the disparity issue, in that I'm in my 7th year of running a program serving food to the homeless in the city of Wilmington, and I found it intriguing when the question was asked, is it cheaper to eat healthy or to eat other? And the bulk of the audience didn't answer the question and didn't actually know the right answer, which is it's cheaper to eat other. As I say, chips are cheap. And running this program and seeing the diversity of people in my line and knowing what it is that they want to eat and don't want to eat, knowing how many of them ask for the salt when they don't need it, it's definitely part of the learning curve, I think, for the providers, because they're not dealing day to day with food insecurity like the people who have it are.
That's actually a very provocative point, so it gets to the whole conversation about social determinants of health, where it's not just a pill. It's all the other stuff that goes on.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
I think that pills are great and they definitely assist, but there is so much more to treating any given disease. And as our population ages and has multiple comorbidities, we can add one more pill to the daily regime, but that doesn't mean that we're going to fix the problem. And it does mean that we have to look at additional possible contraindications, which I have questioned on more than one occasion with prescriptions being given to my husband. And I think that if there were more opportunity to have better education, like I've heard of the DASH diet, but I can't say that I know exactly what it is or how to implement it. So I'm going to go look that up today when I leave here. I think that there's a boatload of information out there, but it's not at your fingertips. It's not readily available. It's not easily attainable unless you know where to go to look for it or what to go to look for. And I think that providers in general could have kidney disease more on their radar, because frankly, I think my husband's kidney disease probably started 10 years ago based on what I've learned to date. And I don't think anybody had it on the radar 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And I think that looking at the bigger picture is what's going to be important, and not just knowing you can fall back on a pill. That's not the only answer.
Sure. Are you participating in any of the workshops?
I'm here for the day.
Okay. And what do you hope to get out of the workshops?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the workshops are going to consist of, but I am definitely interested in participating. Anytime I can gain more information, I can have a Q&A with somebody, I feel better, because my attitude is the only stupid question is the one I didn't ask. So I would much rather ask a question and have it prompt an additional question and gain more information and feedback, and have something else to work with to help care for my husband. So I'm hoping that the workshops allow for that kind of give and take and knowledge.
Well, we hope that the caregiver-patient perspective is the key, and that user physicians can come up with whatever they want, but the patient perspective, does this make sense, is I think going to be very helpful.
Patient perspective and caregiver perspective are critical. It's great that providers have all the knowledge in the world and have all the resources and know who to go to for what, but unless that is shared with the patient and the caregiver, it doesn't do any good. And I from personal experience, I think it needs to be equally shared with the caregiver, especially when you're talking about such chronic conditions as chronic kidney disease or heart failure, because there are times where a patient doesn't have as much understanding as a caregiver does, simply because the patient's already overwhelmed. So when you're dealing with things like using dye for a test, the caregiver should know as well as the patient. And having the opportunity to share the insight that I've gained and the questions that I've come up with and the knowledge that I've gotten over the last few months, sharing that with the providers so that they can look at that perspective and learn how to share that information with other patients and caregivers, I think is a huge opportunity today for both sides of that equation to work together.
Sure. Are there any specific questions that you would like answered? Anything that comes to mind? It could be general, could be specific, but are there concerns that you want to make sure are addressed by this group of subject matter experts?
Some of the specific questions that come to mind for me would be things like, if you're diabetic, you can do a finger stick for your sugar that day. You can find out whether you're good or bad. And as a chronic kidney patient, there's no such thing as a finger prick test for creatinine, which would be great, because my husband's creatinine has bounced all over the place, from 2.1 down to 1.3 and back and forth and in between. And knowing that without having to make an extra stop and a day and a half wait for the lab to do the draw and get the answers would be helpful. And I think that if we could find out whether or not that's on the horizon, that would be nice to know. I think that if providers in general can learn that patients and caregivers may not know the right question to ask but still need the information, I think that chronic kidney disease is under-recognized, and that anything we can all do to help promote that knowledge is helpful. And so I think that having a question and answer kind of give back on that would be good.
This is more general. What kind of, if you could just give us some insight, what kind of technology do you have at home? In other words, do you have internet access? Do you use smartphones? Do you have, without being too brand specific, let's just say laptop or mobile devices? Is that, and do you use email and that sort of thing on a regular basis?
Today's technology is definitely a benefit. My husband and I have access to smartphones, although at times I think they're smarter than we are. We have desktop and laptop computers at home between the two of us, and we also participate with Care Through the VA. So my husband is very active in accessing his health records through the VA. We're getting more active with accessing the health information through the other providers, cardiology and nephrology and whatnot. I think having that information more user-friendly. One of the ladies today referenced having a killer app. I think that would be great. I think that having access to that information would go a long way. One of the struggles that I've had as a caregiver is coordinating who has what information, and timely enough for procedures to be done, for when blood work is drawn, who knows the results of the chest x-ray and when. That kind of information, I guess if we all had the same access to a portal or whatever the technology would call it, I think would be to everyone's benefit. And to be able to update that along the way would be great. Brought my husband in for one procedure and spent an hour with the nurse updating his record to the correct medications. They had wrong names, wrong doses. That's immensely frustrating. Those kinds of things shouldn't happen in today's technological world.
Mm-hmm. What are your concerns about, we hear about privacy concerns and sharing of patient information. Could you just give us a sense of what are your thoughts about that? Because, for example, Google, just share a couple of your thoughts about that.
Okay, privacy in today's technological world is obviously important. HIPAA's there for a reason. I understand it, and at times I'm still frustrated by it, but I get that we need to have it. The concept of moving forward with all of the technology and maybe having something like Google do some of the legwork, some of the groundwork, some of the research, I think would be to everyone's advantage, including Google's, for the recognition of what they might be able to do for us. But I think in the end, it still needs to be something that has privacy built into it. I think that one of the things that would be really nice is we hear again and again and again, and not just today, but electronic health records, how many different sources are there and why are there so many? Why can't they all talk to each other and be more integrated? That's what would make life easier, not only for the providers, but for the patients and caregivers as well. So privacy is important, but I think having access in this world today, the technology, is equally and possibly more important.
And what are your thoughts about telemedicine? Suppose you had the ability to, there's been papers written about the pre-visit work. You know, there are things you can do with technology, for instance, that can potentially, and that would potentially save you trips in terms of running back and forth.
I can't say as I fully understand telemed, but the idea of what I presume telemed is conferencing with the doctor, and assuming it's a video and it's a face-to-face thing where I could see who I'm talking to, because I'm not strictly an electronic kind of person. I think there's some advantage to that, kind of laying the groundwork for the questions for an upcoming visit so that the answers could be shared upon arrival would be fabulous for everybody. That's assuming, of course, that the doctor has the time to do the research anyhow. But it might be that the questions are pretty simple, and with insurance dictating how long your appointment's going to be, going in and getting the answers sooner rather than later would definitely be of benefit. So I think telemed has significant potential in the future.
Okay. Are there any questions? Is there anything? I know that's a general question.
In general, I think that Christiana Care Health System makes a terrific effort to inform the public, and I hope that they are able to continue to maintain such a high level of information sharing and setting up things like this for people, and including patients and caregivers and not just providers, I think is a big step in the right direction. So I'd like to see more patient and caregiver participation type of seminars or junctions for a day or something that would be to everyone's benefit. I think it's a good way to go.
Sure. Well, thank you.
So that being said, how did you feel when you found out about today in Europe?
I opened the email, and I think I got an email telling me about today's event, and I think probably within about 10 seconds of opening the email, it's like, how do I register? Which I did do immediately for myself and for my husband. These kinds of things are just so important, and having the access is critical.
Good.
So yes, I'm very appreciative.
Well, we're glad that you had, and one of the things we made sure is we're videotaping